Jay from Cucumber Shop talking about doing soil blocks in my garden. So first of all, here's my garden. It's doing quite well. Yeah, some of the cucumbers are growing out here quite a bit. There's one right there, and that one's getting ready for seed. If you can see it there. There it is. But what I usually do is I start them, I pre-sprout my seed. That's probably the best way to do it if you want a head start on the garden. And then I often use soil blocks, especially if I can't get in the garden right away or if I have pests that I have to deal with, so I need bigger starts. So let's talk about soil blocks. So this is a small soil blocker for, it's not even an inch. I'd say maybe it's a half to 3/4 of an inch. It makes 20 blocks, and it's mainly for small seed like lettuce. And it's good for things like in greenhouses where they can keep things constantly moist, because you got to keep the seeds moist on the top. They just have that little divot. You could possibly put some fine stuff over that to keep the seeds moist. This is the 4-in-1 kind of 2-inch soil block. These are all made by Ladbrokes, and what I like about these are these little divots that they put in there, so that you can you put this in the mix, you go like that, you get your block ready, and then you go pump it out. And there's some tomato seedlings I have going. Anyways, so usually that's good. The 2-inch is probably the favorite of everyone. It's pretty small for what it's worth. Minimal profile, minimal storage, and gives you most all the benefits that you need. They do make a little cube thing that you can put in here, so you can go from these guys to the 2-inch. Currently I'm going from the 2-inch to the 4-inch, and the reason I do this, the main reason I'm doing this is because I need some more time between growing out these little seedlings and doing a big one like this. So the reason why I do soil blocks over regular pots is because with regular pots, the roots would start wrapping around, but with soil blocks you get what's called air pruning, where the roots, they kind of end it on the edges and don't go any further. Everything stays in the block all nice and snug, and that's very important for cucumbers, because what happens with cucumbers is if you take them out of the pot, it messes with their roots. Or if you use even peat pots will often get in the way. They won't decompose in time, and so the roots are kind of bound in there. You won't get as healthy of a plant. So with soil blocks, the roots go to the end, and then they don't go any further, and it kind of holds the block together. That's very important that you make sure your block gets big enough that it holds it together, especially if you're like me, where you use a mix that's not as high quality as you could, but still high quality for the seeds. So this is a 2-inch, this is the 4-inch, and this just kind of pops in there like that. I'm not going to stick it in there right now because my 4-inch blocks are still wet, and then it'd be almost impossible to get this guy out, because I'm using these for cucumbers mainly, not for tomatoes, though I do love my tomatoes. These are some Taxi tomatoes, one of my favorite. So here's the mix that I use. What I use in my mix is I use some finely sifted dirt, and then I use that with some peat moss, or actually cocoa coir, and some compost and some topsoil, and you mix that all together, and then you put the mold in and press it around, and then you put out the block. Let me think of one more thing. You can use these indoors beforehand transplanting, but the transplants can get quite leggy, so you'll have to do kind of like pet them. That's not saying that your plants are your pets. What it does is it helps the leggy stems to get thicker and the plants not to grow so tall, because when you transplant, you don't want the plants to grow tall. You want them to be kind of stocky and short and have lots of foliage. That's what you would prefer when you put out transplants. So if they ever make something a little easier than these 4-inch blocks take a lot of time to make. One of these guys takes I'd say maybe twice as long as making 4 of these. So you can make almost 8 of these in the time it takes to make 1 of these. It's just the way it is. I haven't found an easier way to go about that. But that's just about it. This is Jay from Cucumber Shop talking about soil blocks and why I use them in my garden and why they're helpful. And I would highly, highly suggest just about everybody out there who gardens and wants to do transplants of their own to get the 2-inch. They're super easy to make, super easy to work with, and well worth your while. The nice thing about doing transplants is then once you have an old crop that's fading away, you can get 2 or 3 crops in a year instead of 1 because you got the transplants. As soon as 1 crop's done, you can move it out and then start your next transplants and your next crop. Save a lot of time that way, a lot of your light in the season you can save that way, and make the most of your garden, especially if you compost a lot. Your garden grows real fast, and then you might have something that looks like that. And there's a bee pollinating. Oh, I am so grateful for the bees. They make my work so much easier. Again, this is Jay from Cucumber Shop. We'll take a couple look at the cucumbers while we're here. That's what we do. We do cucumbers. And we'll look over here at a couple cucumbers on the way out, talking about soil blocks, but also I'm always talking cucumbers. There we go. These guys are starting to set seed. This is my 3-in-1 vine here. Oh, there we go. So this is Jay from Cucumber Shop, talking about soil blocks and cucumbers, of course.